Greetings and welcome to the PLP Pathways Season 2 webinar number 10. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about how folks are evaluating their Act 77 implementation. We have a special guest today. We have Scott Thompson from the Tarrant Institute, and I'll let him introduce himself in just a second. And before we go any further, though, I'd like to thank the Middle Grades Collaborative for sponsoring our work, as well as the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education. So as I mentioned, we have a special guest today, Scott Thompson. And Scott, do you want to tell us a little bit about your role at Tarrant and what your mission is with Tarrant?
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. As Don said, I'm Scott Thompson. I'm a professional development coordinator with the Tarrant Institute. I predominantly work with schools in Chittenden County, but essentially we develop partnerships with schools over 3 years and help them manage their school change agenda with support, professional development, and making connections, much like PLP Pathways does. We're asking the same questions and sharing resources. So happy to join today.
Thank you very much. And Scott has created a little bit of an evaluation tool that I shared with folks, and we'll go over that in just a little bit here. But as we're heading into the final stages of the school year, a big question that's come up is how folks are evaluating their implementation of the 3 pillars of personalization, PLPs, proficiency-based learning, and flexible pathways. And if we could just hear from the panel members and just tell us how you are starting to evaluate your program and how you're transitioning into planning for next year, just sort of in a nutshell, that would be a good place to start. And why don't we start with Maura?
Hi, I'm Maura Kelly. I teach 7th and 8th grade at People's Academy Middle Level in Morrisville, Vermont. And in thinking about our evaluation of our program, we haven't really started thinking about that holistically as a school. But we currently, just yesterday, had our faculty meeting, and our leadership meeting rather, and we were talking about sort of the work that's being done on all of the teams. Our real focus right now is on sort of our culminating events and our showcases. And so over the next week, all of our students are going to be showcasing their portfolios as their final sort of culminating event of the year. And so our plan for after that sort of event, that's when teachers are going to start reflecting on that work. And we have curriculum camp within our district, and so that's a week-long professional development opportunity, and that's really when we're going to dig through some of this work. But the way that we've scaffolded our share outs, we have our 8th graders going to the high school and sharing with their new TA teacher and showcasing their portfolio that way. Our 6th and 7th graders are being put in their new TAs. Our 6th graders are moving up into the upper house, and they're showcasing with each other as sort of an audience and a getting to know you type routine. And our 8th graders and our 5th graders are actually going to be doing some work together on their portfolios. And our 5th graders are going to be sharing their portfolios with the 4th graders when they come over for their step up. We're trying to build it into some of our tradition routines and really establishing the sharing of goals and work with as a part of our culture. So once that happens and all the teachers get to see all of the portfolio shares, that's when really we're going to take a step back and really talk about sort of evaluating our programming and making changes for next year.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay, how are you evaluating your program?
Well, so we have also like Maura, we don't have a holistic approach, like a school-wide approach, but at this point in time, but for our team, and my name is Lindsay Hallman, and I'm a teacher on the Edge Academy team at Essex Middle School. Sorry for not introducing myself. And I work with 7th and 8th graders. We have our annual project fair coming up next Tuesday, and that is a large culminating event for our students and their year-long project work, which is centered around their PLP and their our negotiated curriculum process. And so they are right now we are prepping and finalizing and putting things together and practicing our presentations We have a project fair both during the day for other students in the school and community members, and then we have an evening project fair as well for their families and community partners. So that's how we, I mean, as far as evaluation or assessment, we do that, all these little steps along the way, but then we also, during the project fair, look at the transferable skills and our, as many of the areas that we assess them around presentation and communication skills, working collaboratively, which have been ongoing reflection and research. So a lot of it is not like it's not a final assessment necessarily, because there's so many small pieces that have led up to today. But they will be, really highlighting their work and their learning for the year. And they will also be we've been piloting Protean, so they'll be using Protean to share their work on their goals this year.
All right, thank you. Allison?
Yeah, hi, I'm Allison. I work at U32 Middle High School. I have an 8th grade advisory, and I'm on the 9th grade teams. And as they're culminating artifacts and ability to show growth mindset throughout this year, they are presenting their site, which we've done in Google Sites. All parents have been invited, so they should have an authentic audience of some teachers, their fellow classmates who happen to be in the room at the time of the final exam, or some other times ahead of time. Any parents who want to show up and just ask them questions about areas of growth for this year and kind of their goals for next year, just setting the groundwork for when they come back in the fall. This is what I did in 9th grade and what are my goals looking forward from here. I was thinking of what Maura said yesterday at our whole school faculty meeting. Formally, for us to evaluate Act 77, we just had, but a couple months ago, the integrated field review from the AOE, and they looked at all these various aspects, the pillars of Act 77, not the way we see it as PLP pathways, but they definitely gave our school some feedback based on interviews and things that they saw when they were touring the school related to the pillars. And then informally, I think we're evaluating on a class by class, and our 9th grade team has done a couple protocols just of how this year went and then moving forward. But it's definitely more informal than formal.
Right. Yeah, there's just so many different approaches and things that I'm writing down about, really good ideas. One of the things that I wanted to, I think that we've fallen a little bit behind in terms of making sure that we're giving kids the opportunity to present and sort of demonstrate their PLP growth to the parents. I think there's been some issues at the school in terms of, everybody's not in the same place yet with the implementation. And so getting a school-wide, as Maura said, or a holistic process where you have kids coming in, and it sounds like Lindsay has kids coming in, parents coming in and reviewing the PLP. That's where we want to be. And down the road, we'd like to, plan that in when everybody's at the sort of the same stage with their PLPs and with their Act 77 work. One of the things that's happening, and this really is one of the benefits of participating in this group, is that Lindsay has, really promoted the student negotiated curriculum. And so this year we're actually concluding our first unit that was really completely student negotiated. And I learned a ton in that, through that process. And so we're finishing that, and the kids are going to be presenting to each other, sort of their systems independent project, which they've created. And that project actually met this criteria, this guiding question that we've had for the whole year, except they were allowed to go and explore an issue of interest and then demonstrate their learning using the transferable skills. So next week, we're starting to go through that process. And so in terms of evaluating at least my program, it's really trying to figure out how the student negotiated curriculum is going to fit in to the overall arc of the existing curriculum and the skills that we need kids to be practicing, and where we can fit more negotiated curriculum into our program. Using Google Forms, we collected a lot of great data. The kids were unbelievable. They gave me some unbelievable feedback about what they believe is important and what works with the negotiated curriculum. So for me, it's really about starting to figure out what went well this year, tapping into the teachers who are working with these kids, tapping into the kids, and then starting to make plans for next year so that we can, we can hit the ground running. And, here's a spot where, Scott, I'd like to hear more from you about how you see other schools evaluating their Act 77 work, and how's that going? And is there a tool out there that we can be accessing through Tarrant or the Middle Grades Collaborative? And what are your thoughts and opinions about that?
Yeah, well, I'm really interested to hear more from Allison about what sort of the AOE kind of brought in, because there's some hope there that when we look at assessment of schools, if we can kind of streamline it so we don't have 17 different assessments coming in, and also have the feedback be usable. One of the things that happened last week, which was really interesting to me, was Tarrant Institute hosted a PLP redesign with students, where we had students from various schools kind of come together, and Lori Lisai was the facilitator, and she did an amazing job, but really just allowed students to share what was happening in their schools, and then had a chance for students to kind of mix up a little bit and kind of debrief across different schools. And then what you could see is like these ideas percolating, where they like this idea from this school and this idea from this school. And so the hope is that the student voice is what goes back to their home schools, that sort of starts to drive that cycle of asking questions of, we like this, but we really want to change this. And I believe that information is all being captured electronically as schools debrief. So I guess I would say just really, if we want to take a simple piece of the PLP, simply just asking students, how's it going? Is it meaningful? Is it relevant? Is it making sense? And as you said, Dawn, you might have gotten some of that in your Google Forms survey, but chances are that they have some really good feedback for us as to how's it going. And then, in the bigger Act 77 context, I think this is really an emerging conversation, right? Because people are just beginning or just finishing their first maybe year and a half of sort of, the different aspects of the 3 pillars, and asking questions of like, are we doing this right? Or is this kind of what's going on? Which kind of leads to the theme of the Middle Grades Institute this year of, the theme is in practice. So the hope is that we get to look at everyone's sort of trial and error, like here's the best that we could do, and then those resources are shared. And then, in terms, Dawn, of your question of like whole school piece, one of the things that I'm working on is trying to put together that kind of tool for folks. For folks that have been to MGI, it's going to be a module, and if folks have feedback or specific things that they want in there, it'd be really good that we're trying to put something together that not only is intentional about tying the 3 pillars together, right? They don't just stand in isolation, but how do we have this meaningful tool that helps us look at where we are in relationship to where we want to be? And it, I don't know the grain size yet, and I don't know, it'd be great if we could have teachers, administrators, students, community sort of participate in that, but that may be a pipe dream at this point. But we got to start somewhere.
Just quick feedback on that. I think what would be really interesting is if we were able to, I'm looking at your document now, the PLPs, and how those are, you're looking at PLPs and you have some challenges and successes. And I'm wondering if we could have specific examples that could be attached for folks, so that they could see how different schools are operating on that. And go ahead.
I'll say I like that idea. So I'd love to ask all of you to share some examples with me.
And
Can you
go ahead, Maura.
There's a lot of feedback. So you can't really hear what you're asking. Can anyone else hear it?
I can hear.
It's okay now.
It's okay now.
No, it's kind of there. I think it's okay now.
Can you ask her a question again, Tom?
Yep. The question is how, if we could figure out, if you look at Scott's document, he has 3 areas that he's working on to evaluate. One is PLPs, another one is flexible pathways, and the last one is proficiency-based learning, right? And I'm wondering what would be interesting is if as people are using that tool and as people are starting to evaluate their program on those 3 pillars, if when they say, hey, this is a challenge, for example, in the flexible pathways, developing community partnerships is a challenge. And if there was a resource where they could then tap into and see, hey, look how Allison's doing this. Look how Lindsay's doing this. Look how Maura's doing this. And they could see almost like modules or examples of how people are doing that. And I know some of this is going to feed into the Middle Grades Institute. But again, if those could be on our website, Scott, or if those could be on a location where we could be sending those out on a regular basis as pieces of educational sort of material for folks, I think that would be really interesting. And I also think that I had talked to James Nagel about doing a big, huge survey at the Middle Grades Institute where we can gather all of this information and really see where the needs are. So as people are evaluating their programs, we could be helping them plug in with that information or with those resources. And I guess just sort of specifically, I'd like to go down the line again. And for example, on Scott's document, he starts with PLPs. And I mean, how are you evaluating PLPs at your school? And what's the state of those? And why don't we start with Allison this time?
Yeah, similar to the last answer, there's no formal evaluation right now. As a whole school, they're housed in Naviance, and then different teams or different grades take aspects of them. So our 9th grade has done a great job with using them in sites. And again, it's a lot of the informal student feedback, feelings from day to day, feelings as we open it, where they are with it. I think I'll have a more comprehensive as well view as we take videos of their presentations of the sites, because their true colors will come out about how the whole process went at the end of the year.
Lindsay, how are you guys evaluating your PLP process or your PLPs? What does that look like?
Well, just like Allison, we don't have a formal process in place yet at our school. But I imagine that's, that will be coming soon. We just are a recently merged district, and a lot of different structures are changing for us. So I imagine that's on the agenda. But when I look at Scott's document about reflecting on, the PLPs, what I see is, that it builds in depth, kind of like PLPs are currently being implemented at our school. Like I can only talk to my team, and that they're owned and driven by the students. There's participation by family is another important party. That their goals and aspirations are valued, and then their sharing with the community happens both with their families, each other, and at the project fair. So I like how it builds in. It builds as from just kind of implementation to deeper integration into the system in those statements. And I don't know if everyone else is on that document, but we don't evaluate. Again, when you ask that question, are you asking about like systematic evaluation, or are you from a professional view, or are you asking about evaluation for students?
I think it's a little bit of both. For me, it's, how are students viewing the PLP process? And then also it's asking teachers, what's your opinion about the PLP as a useful educational tool? So one of the things, and I may have commented, Scott, on this, on the online document, but one of the things I see with the PLP is is a question for me is your PLP driving curriculum, right? So on our PLP, we're looking for evidence of citizenship. And so am I starting to provide opportunities for kids to experience citizenship through project-based learning or through community action or through action around the school? So, for me, Lindsay, it's two things. It's how are the students, how are they feeling about it? It's how are teachers feeling about it and using it? And then I think, as you alluded to before, one of the most important constituencies, if not the most important, is the families. Are the families finding this to be useful? And how are we communicating this to the family? And I think that's an area that I know I can certainly improve in. So what do you think about that, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just want to make sure I was following the right path there with my response. But I think that, and maybe that's the case for many schools, and I might just, could be totally wrong, but right now I think where we are is that, especially in middle schools, each team kind of has their own process around it. And I guess that brings up kind of like a professional dilemma in the sense that, what happens when it becomes a systematic process? Do we lose that authenticity from the team culture and the student buy-in piece? So that's what's coming up for me with this whole evaluation conversation. Not that I have, not that it's a good or a bad thing. I'm not trying to put a qualifier on it, but I just want to put it out there as, that provides, something to think about is like Act 77, the way that we implement Act 77, are we going to be like practicing what we preach? Like what Act 77 at the core, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Having like tangential, thoughts, but I agree that we should evaluate our system so that we can continue to better our work and ensure that, students are really engaged and empowered by their PLPs and the 3 pillars. But as far as assessment of students' PLPs, I've always been, that's an area I've always said no. That's my personal belief. But there's so many, because that's a compilation of their, that's their thing. It's not me to evaluate their work, but it's for me to have conversations with them and then for them to share it with their families and their community. So I'll stop there.
No, I totally agree. I think there's this quote that I've heard about uniformity crushes innovation.
Yes.
And I'm very worried about that. But at the same time, too, I kind of want to keep up with the Joneses. I know that, like, just listening to you guys, Maura and Lindsay and Allison, each of you is moving forward and, you're talking to families. You're having these presentations. You're having 8th graders talk to 5th graders. So you're creating these cultures around personalization. And I think those are really important. And is there a way that, an educator could say, okay, where are the best PLP programs in the state? What are they doing? And, are there certain things that I could be integrating into my curriculum? So for me, talking to Lindsay this year, it's been student negotiated curriculum. When I listen to Maura, it's, boy, I really need to be pushing hard for a holistic presentation piece at the end of the 8th grade year, where we can have all students, meeting with their families. But then I also think to what Lindsay said about how are we creating equity for all students, right? Like, how are we evaluating whether or not this is working for our entire student body, not just the go-getters, but the kids who maybe are disengaged and need to be, need to recognize why education is important. And then just Maura, do you have some comments?
Yeah, just thinking about, the evaluation side of it, I think, the work that students are putting onto their PLP, most of that work is assessed either using the transferable skills or using the student's proficiency. So a student is putting on a mastery assessment or a project that they did in a class. They already had feedback. They've already done revisions. Chances are that that was used for a content area and it was assessed. So it doesn't make sense to then assess sort of the portfolio, because that, that's not really what that is going to be used for. What is the purpose of that assessment? You know, I could see it being used as like a transcript verification at some point way down. And that would be more, you know, 12th grade or some piece like that. But in the middle level, it's really showcasing student work, which we, you know, we would have been talking to them about. And then their goals work, we would be talking with them about the transferable skills. They're reflecting and self-evaluating on that work through their reflections. So it doesn't make sense to use the portfolio, to have a teacher assess a portfolio for a student, in my mind right now, in my current understanding of sort of what we're doing. But I do see sort of a school's ability to use an evaluation tool in the sense of saying, okay, if these are the components, if these are the core components of what implementing Act 77 is and what the best practices are within that implementation, where do we have some gaps? And not saying, okay, so now as a whole school, we have to do it this way, but just helping teams identify where the gaps are. Because even thinking about my own programming, I know that I have gaps and I need to draw attention to those blind spots that I have. And in doing that and having the opportunity to talk to other people or have a resource, it'll create a more robust program for my students. And so I think, you know, I think one of the benefits of having it be cultural, like team level, part of the team culture and identity, is that you get the buy-in of the students. But it's also very important that we're making sure that our students are, you know, getting every opportunity they can to successfully, you know, have those community connections, have citizenship opportunities. And I think when it is at the team level, it can be easy to miss those pieces if we're not having whole school conversations about it, or if it isn't a norm of the whole school that every student has exposure to, you know, whatever this thing is. And not the same exposure, but just we can say that students are getting these opportunities. And I think it would create hopefully more collaboration among teams within schools and around the state, and it will help to push sort of everyone's thinking a little bit in the direction that will benefit kids.
Scott, do you have any thoughts about conversation?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, everybody. You know, one of the things, or one of the thoughts behind the document that I was writing is just to make sure that people are going back and asking the question, is this getting us to where we want to be? And not so much the evaluation of the content of the PLP, but really people's time is so crunched and sort of the things that they're tasked with. So is there a way to create an opportunity for folks to just say, is this having the leverage that we want? Is this, are we getting to all kids? As Don, you mentioned the equity piece, which is, you know, an underpinning of the Act 77. And I sometimes worry that if we don't intentionally create those opportunities, they don't necessarily happen sometimes. And I totally hear, Lindsay, what you were referring to, like, we don't want to totally take the innovation away or kill this process by implementing this sort of standards checklist, but how do we come together and say, how are we doing? Where are we at? What can we do better at? You know, really those kind of big picture questions, and maybe not so much the micro grains of the law, but and also too, one of my big sort of filters, again with PLPs is it having leverage in other places, right? We don't just do the PLP to have this beautiful portfolio. You know, it's a place where proficiencies can live. It's a place where you can see the student negotiated curriculum. It's a place, another opportunity that we can share the work that's happening with our students, with people that they care about, their families, their community mentors. And I think we have some growth there in terms of what we share with communities. And one of my other wonderings is, you know, we swim in this pool a lot. We're trying to figure out all of the pillars of Act 77, and you know, what does our learning and community conversations look like with our communities for people that aren't asking these questions daily and living it? You know, so how well are the communities understanding both the intent, the purpose, the why are we shifting from sort of what we look at as legacy practice to this personalized learning practice? And one of the really good, I liked your piece, Don, about including examples, because I think that that would really help people have conversations in figuring out, you know, is this the right thing for their students, for their community? And so I like that idea. I'm going to have to work on that.
The other thing that I just want to mention real quick, and we're getting a little bit of the echo back, I think. Scott, can you mute for one? There we go. So one of the things that I just wanted to mention really quickly was the conversation we had last time where Maura talked about once you recognize those gaps across your team or across your school, is developing a professional development plan to address those gaps. And I think, Lindsay, one of the values, and let me back up a second. I don't evaluate my kids' PLPs, right? As Maura said, usually that's the final product. That's where they're curating and creating a website to put out there for the public. So by the time it's on their PLP, it should have been vetted already. But I do think there's a huge advantage in being able to see kids, how they put their information together, how they curate it, and how that reflects their growth and learning. But I do believe that, you know, if we say, hey, I have some gaps, like maybe I have a gap in proficiency-based learning, and I want to make sure that I really understand different aspects of learning scales and curriculum design and sort of the nuts and bolts of making sure that we're doing proficiencies right. And if I see that that's a gap and that it's not being reflected in my students' growth and learning, how do I develop or get professional development around that? So one of the key things I believe is that if we're doing this as a school and saying, hey, these are some of the areas where we need growth, then we can be looking at examples, exemplars, and we can also be starting to say, hey, what's the professional development that's going to get us to where we need to go? And I think, Maura, in your position, that's where you're going to be able to build out to where do we want to be a year down the road, 3 years down the road, and 5 years down the road, and how are we going to create a professional development program that's going to get us there. And so in some ways, the evaluation tool could really be used to create a unified professional development foundation for schools and teams and teachers. Any comments on that?
Yeah, one piece that I get really excited about, as you just mentioned, is, you know, schools are starting to bring on these personalization coaches and these proficiency coaches, which haven't necessarily been traditionally part of school. And so that's an area that I get excited about when I see schools learning and adapting. So, you know, someone like Maura, as you just mentioned, might be the catalyst for that school or that district to put together a process to be able to answer those questions. So I get excited about that.
What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, it cut out. Did you say Lindsay?
Yeah, I said Lindsay. What are your thoughts about using the evaluation of the Act 77 to kind of work on professional development? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Well, I mean, in the document that we were looking at, I feel like is spot on in the sense that it keeps it. And I wasn't trying to imply that the evaluation tool that we were looking at just right now, a document, was going to squash innovation, because I felt like actually it did the opposite. It was it kept it open enough so that schools, and teams, if the intention's put out there that, let me back up. I guess what I want to say is that team culture is very important, in middle schools. And I also think that equity is a big part of it too, as Don mentioned. And I think we need to look at how those two can be blended so that systematically, like that checklist we were just looking at, like those are the criteria that are at the heart of Act 77 that everyone should be, ensuring is happening. That's for equity. And then each team, how they, based on their team philosophy and their team culture and the relationships they have with the kids and each other, should then take that piece and then still have that authenticity to it, so that there is engagement on the kids' behalf, and that it doesn't become a check, just like, are you doing this? Is it done on this date? I want to see this. And, and then check, check, check. But I do think professionally, that's an excellent tool to say, like, hey, you've done these things. Now, where do we need support so that we can grow together as a team, to grow together as a school system, and also let's celebrate our successes, because it is going to take time to implement this, and it's going to constantly be, working to better and better the system. Everything's going to be changing, for us every year, and so I just don't want it to become this thing that just is static, and then it's not a dynamic piece of work that we continue to change with our changing population of youth, and so I think the evaluation tool systematically, and also to use on your team, like on the micro and the macro level, is an important idea. But I also have those concerns around equity and maintaining that team culture.
I would love to see a tool like that being like part of the protocol, being to use a tool with the students, or do some like imagining with students of, okay, these were our gaps that, take all the feedback. This is what were current practices. This is how students view it. This is what students think we're actually achieving. This is what teachers think we're achieving. And then, having a process where students and teachers are imagining, okay, so how do we fill those gaps? How do we negotiate to make sure that we're hitting all the key pieces? Because I think then it comes back to the team level. Because each team has different students, and the students really are driving it, and that's part of what creates that team culture. And so I think that would be just a really nice way to help teachers really navigate these changes, because the students are the ones that are impacted the most, and we're trying to personalize things for them. And so they're the ones that really should have a big voice in steering some of, the direction that we have within the systems that we can provide for them.
And I totally agree with that. And I think that would be so empowering for students and also for programs, and that the students could see these improvements that they're making. But just in thinking about it, really the evaluation document, whatever, is a huge tool for teacher reflection, right? Teacher professional reflection. And so when you start looking at it, you start thinking about, what am I doing in my practice? What do I want to be doing in my practice? And what are the kids telling me I should be doing in my practice? And I think that reflection piece is something that we talk a lot about we talk a lot about that here. We talk a lot about that at the Middle Grades Institute, how that's where the learning happens, is through that reflection. So really the tool can be considered a foundation for reflection. And if that's the case, it could also be sort of the spark to have not only individuals, as Maura was saying, reflect, but also teams and schools, and then really work on designing the improvements to get people where they need to go. Does anybody have any sort of last comments on the evaluation topic? I have a few odds and ends that I need to go over before we're all out of here. But any final comments on this evaluation topic?
I would just second what Lindsay was saying. I think similar to how I feel about other evaluative tools, that if it becomes a checklist, it isn't meaningful. It needs to be very qualitative. It needs to open discussion and lead to these critical conversations that need to happen school-wide. If it's just this checklist, Naviance, PLPs, like our school is good, that isn't meaningful, and it could be.
Absolutely. Scott, any final thoughts?
No, just that I really agree with everyone, and yeah, the checklisty thing is something that I feel like we want to stay as far away from as possible, and I think folks' comments and feedback have helped me think about how to sort of change what I've written to ultimately lead on where you were kind of going in, like what's the next direction and what's the PD that we need, and I would even say I don't even really want to use the word evaluation.
Right.
That has so many contexts in our field, but No, it's been really helpful, and I think if we can find a way to just be able to answer the question, is this serving our community or is this serving our students in a way that we think is positive, kind of like that really big picture question, that is something that could be helpful.
All right.
One of the things, as we've been having this conversation, to me, it almost feels like an audit. It's like an energy audit. How is your house doing? Is your roof leaking energy? Do you need more insulation in the basement? Do you need to change out your windows? Do you need CFL light bulbs? It's like you're doing this audit of your programming and you're identifying those gaps, and then you're creating plans to make it better. It's like, in my mind, that's kind of what I've been thinking about the whole. There also was someone doing an energy audit in my classroom this morning, so that's probably why I went there. But that's kind of where my brain's been going as we've been talking.
But I think that's a big deal, because when you say audit, I'm like, oh yeah, it's an audit. It feels a lot less threatening than like the evaluation process.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, again, good conversation. It's always a good conversation. A couple things. Number one, I want to thank Allison for her blog post. Really good blog post. Put a lot of work into it. That was published yesterday. I appreciate that. I also just want to thank each and every one of you for all the work that you've been doing. I know that this is something extra, but in terms of my own professional development, that's outstanding. And the effort you guys are putting forth and your wisdom and experience are just fantastic. And I get so much out of these conversations, and I just really appreciate everything that you guys are doing for kids and how hard everybody's working. It's just really impressive. I also just want to remind folks out there that Middle Grades Institute is coming up on June 26th through June 30th at Champlain College. And I think everybody's going to be there, and so that'll be good. There'll be some PLP Pathways activities, which will also be good. I think it's going to be a vibrant and exciting week, and I'm looking forward to that. Now, just real quick, I'd like everybody to tell me their last day of school and one thing that they're looking forward to doing this summer. We'll start with Allison.
Sure. Last day of school is the 20th. And in addition to MGI, I'm doing a course for science teachers in Costa Rica about inquiry practices.
Nice. Lindsay?
So my last day with students is on the 16th, and my last day for teachers is the 21st. And I believe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 21st. And this summer I am not performing in a ballet company, which is very nice because I actually have a summer and I cannot wait to just travel and be with my daughter a lot and my husband and garden a ton. And I just want to put in a plug. There's been a lot of buzz in the Twitter world about using the Sustainable Development Goals, the global goals, to guide our PBL work and all sorts of learning with kids, how we view our curriculum and the negotiated curriculum process. And Cultivating Pathways to Sustainability is going to have a second year. We have the date, September 21st at Shelburne Farms. It's a kickoff for 5th through 12th grade is what we did last year, which seemed to work really well. Schools and teams from around Vermont, youth to come with an adult or two to make an action plan on how they're going to implement a focus on the goals and their project work for the year. And it was an amazing year. We had our celebration at People's last month, I believe, and year two should be even better.
All right, Maura.
Our last student day is June 16th, and this summer I'm getting married. Yay. And I'm starting a new job, so it's crazy.
Yeah, awesome. Scott.
Well, I don't have a last day with students, but looking forward to getting on the water and getting into the woods with my daughter, and probably a significant amount of daddy daycare.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So my last day with kids is June 22nd. And then I have a work day on the 23rd, and I have a weekend, and then I have MGI.
Oh, goodness.
but I'm trying to take like 7 weeks off this summer and not do anything. And what I'm really looking forward to is sitting on a beach with a cheap novel and not worrying about anything, and maybe a little fly fishing for some striped bass. One thing I just want to mention to Lindsay, Lindsay, I have taken that recommendation with those sustainability goals.
Mhm.
I've already had kids starting to look at them and identify what they think is the three most important of those goals. And next year, those are going to be a foundation both for our citizenship work on our PLP, but also as a foundation for our work on the green team. And I believe one of the things I want to do is have us do independent projects through our green team around sustainability. And we're going to be using those goals as a basis for it. So I really thank you for that resource. It's been excellent. And we're already starting to implement that into our process. Two more things. I want to thank Middle Grades Collaborative and the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education for supporting the PLP Pathways. This is our second season. We're on tap for a third season next year. I want to remind you guys that PLP Pathways has shared a calendar with you that already has those dates. If you don't have access to that, let me know, or we can consolidate and meet together at the MGI and just go over those. The first webinar next year is going to be September 28th. The second one is going to be October 19th, but I've shared that and through a PLP Pathways calendar with you. I want to thank Scott Thompson for taking the time to join our conversation. It's very much appreciated, and I hope everybody has a restful, relaxing, and joyful start to the summer. Good luck with this last week, and have a great afternoon.